Well, thanks, Greg. I think also one of the most noticeable attributes of your guitars, obviously, is the elevated fingerboard. And I wondered if you'd speak a little bit about how that came about and what you're looking to achieve with that design as well.
Okay. Um, well, to be perfectly frank, I started doing that when I was getting going in my career, and I was getting a lot of comments from people telling me that they really liked my guitars, but that they played guitars by Tom Humphrey, and his guitars, the Millennium guitar has quite an elevated fingerboard, and they couldn't bear the idea of giving it up. And I thought to myself, oh, maybe this is worth pursuing. So I thought about designing a guitar that also had an elevated fingerboard, but I did it in a very different way than Tom's. Basically what I do is I curve the upper bow downward toward the back of the instrument and bring the neck on top of that. And that gives the elevation. And the reason is purely to make it easier to play above the 12th fret. There's no acoustic advantage to doing it. There's no, I don't think there's an aesthetic advantage, but at any rate, it does make it easier to play up high for the vast majority of players.
I've heard from some builders recently that are intentionally building curves into the soundboard to give it sort of a corrugated effect and stiffen it across the grain. Do you notice any of that effect with your design?
Well, yes, it does. It does stiffen up the upper bow, no question about it. And that could be a good or a bad consequence depending on the rest of your design. And I've found that it makes very little difference in my guitars. But most recently, I'm starting to rethink that, and I'm in the process of developing a few things that may make a difference. I'm not sure yet what direction that's going, but it is possible that can have an effect on the overall character of the sound.
And one of the other things that my clients have always commented about your guitars, you seem to pay meticulous attention to intonation, the nut and the saddle, and I just wonder if you'd share your thoughts about the importance of that in a guitar.
Yeah. Well, that's something that I've always felt is important. For me personally, I had a real struggle when I first started building to make a guitar that played in tune everywhere, and I started investigating the problem and found that the solutions that other people had come up with didn't quite all solve the problem. They may have been halfway solutions that were working in the right direction, but I felt like there was a better way, and over a course of several years, and with the help of a good friend of mine who was a physicist, we developed a mathematical model and implemented it, and did some experimental work, and really found a system that optimizes intonation for the classical guitar. And it depends on actually cutting the fingerboard short at the nut end by roughly 1 millimeter, and compensating for each string separately, and in addition to the normal compensation at the saddle end. And it works really quite well for all strings. It's optimized for nylon strings on most of my guitars, but it can be adjusted slightly for carbon strings as well.
Well, thanks so much, Greg. And I guess the last question I have is if there's anything new on the horizon and any directions that you're headed that might be innovative or that we may not know about yet, sort of experimental in nature perhaps?
Yeah. Well, it's true. I have actually been working on some new ideas, or maybe I should say I have a long-term project that's starting to come to fruition a little bit. Many years ago, I thought that I have a science background, so I thought that it would be really wonderful to be able to do some controlled experiments with the construction of the guitar. And I had in mind building some experimental guitars that could be completely taken apart and modified and then put back together again over and over. And so with this in mind, a few years ago, well, really only a year and a half ago, I had the good fortune of having a young apprentice in my shop who built for me several of these instruments. Basically, I have 4 backs, 4 sets of sides, 4 necks, and 6 soundboards, all which can be screwed together and unscrewed. And the soundboards can be braced or unbraced in any particular way with thinned out hide glue, and the braces replaced easily. And with this, we've started to conduct some experiments where we actually have sample size of greater than 1, which is the typical sample size a luthier has when doing experiments. And we're working fairly methodically to try to understand what the effects of different soundboard thicknesses are, back and sides thicknesses, what effects they have, what effects shaping of the transverse bar below the sound hole has. I've just begun to work with just a simple 7-fan bracing system in the lower bowels, but I have the intention of modifying that in various ways. And, so anyway, the system has unlimited potential. It just takes a lot of time and effort to make it work. But one of the interesting early results is that the guitars made this way sound pretty darn good, even the ones that shouldn't. So it's disheartening when I hear these things and they sound virtually as good as my own guitars. But at any rate, that's what I'm working on.
Great, Greg. Thanks so much for taking the time out of the show to come and speak with us. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.